Let's face it, Hollywood is a lot, but for many of us, it's the only life we can imagine. I'm Sam Brooks, and my goal with this podcast is to take not yet screenwriters from their first homesick night in Los Angeles all the way to the red carpet. Welcome to Screenwriter Survival Guide.
Welcome to Screenwriter Survival Guide, the podcast about becoming a Hollywood screenwriter from somebody who's on that journey with you. Today on the show, in honor of New Year's, we're talking about our favorite films and TV shows of 2021. To help me with this, I'm joined by filmmaker Sabur Tahir, and we're going to be making our list of the top 5 movies and TV shows of the year. For the TV shows, every episode must have premiered within 2021. If you enjoyed our discussions here, I really encourage you to go listen to the pair of episodes we did on SABUR'S podcast, Express and Refresh, where we did a deep dive on my former boss, Ridley Scott's 2 2021 films, The Last Duel and House of Gucci. Links to both are in the show notes. But for now, Sabur, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Hell yeah, man. All right, so I kind of want to start off. So this is the first of these ranking podcasts I've done. So I'm kind of basing it off of, I think you also listen to the Ringer podcast a lot. So I'm going to be channeling my Sean Fennessy here. So let's just start off. Sabur, how did you feel about 2021 as a year for film and television?
You know, I think it's been a very interesting year. I think it's been a huge thing for television. Possibly because, you had so many, things on streaming services. You had so much stuff on Hulu, so much stuff on HBO Max, so much stuff of new content on Netflix. I really think it's been a great year for just streaming overall for TV shows. Now for movies has been kind of interesting because you haven't really been able to do they haven't really been able to break numbers necessarily. Like we haven't really been able to. However, and I know that there's Omicron right now, but as Omicron is ruffling through, Spider-Man is breaking numbers, so maybe Hollywood will be back. I don't know. Spider-Man though has done very, very well, so I think it shows you that hey, movies might be back, and I think that's always a great thing. I haven't honestly. But I think it's been a very good year. You've had so many big budget releases, so many superhero movies, so many big budget movies that you thought you'd never see when you were a kid that happened this year, like Mortal Kombat and I think King Kong versus Godzilla.
Godzilla versus King Kong. Godzilla versus Kong or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter what the title of that movie is.
But
big,
yeah,
punchy,
you've had a lot of great titles, I think, this year, and I think it's been a really great job for TV, and I think film is making a comeback with so much so much content. I think it's been really good, and I think having worked at the movie theaters, so in 2021 I worked in, technically, if we're including January as 20 and I guess January is 2021.
That's 2021.
I've worked in 4 different AMCs. I worked in one in Neshaminy, PA. I worked in one in Philadelphia, PA. And then I'm flopping back between my local theater in New Jersey and the one in Boston Common 19, which I am not trying to flex or self-entitle anything. But it is currently top 3 in the nation in terms of ticket sales for theaters.
Very nice.
So, and it's in very well with Spider-Man. So I know what it's like to kind of be in a compacted movie theater. And I've dealt with it. I've been on the front lines with all the big budget movies. In terms of TV shows, though, I haven't watched too much, but I've watched a good amount. So, I think there's a lot of good leeway for that. But I have to say, go ahead.
Well, I think you're right that film, it hasn't seen a comeback box office wise, but I think in terms of quality wise, or not necessarily even quality, but exciting movies we want to talk about. I don't know if it is an especially good year for that, but it feels like it. Just because of kind of the desert it was that's not the right word, the drought we had last year. So that was, we had nothing last year in terms of big exciting movies, and that is where my heart lies. I know there's art films. I know I should care about Nomadland. I thought it was a perfectly good movie, but that's not where my heart lies. My heart lies in these big genre exciting movies. And this has been just a great year for that, and it could just be when you put it next to 2020, but I think, you're right. I mean, everything from Dune to what was it, 3 Marvel movies again to
and Suicide Squad.
And the
DC movie.
Suicide Squad, I forgot there's been so many like good movies like that this year that like I forgot they existed or even came out this year. Like the Suicide Squad was a really good movie. That was a
Yeah.
really good superhero movie. And it's the title is just maybe one of the worst titles. It's up there with like Shawshank Redemption for like one of the worst titles to give a movie, but because
Well, it's based off
like
a comic
the SEO
book
is
team,
just
I think.
awful. What?
It's based off a comic book team. That's what they're called in the comics.
No, not the name. I just mean for the SEO because there was a movie like 2 years ago that called Suicide Squad.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah. No, I think the name is cool inherently, but like I think it's bad when you put it next to its other movie. But yeah, I think also TV, especially like I was expecting this year to kind of suck in TV, because like I cannot imagine what it's like shooting something at a big budget with COVID protocols in place. That just seems like a disaster. And the fact that they're able to do it and still give us like amazing seasons of television again and again and again is just like insane. I can't even imagine how they're able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a huge opportunity for that. You're having, an HBO Max. You're having, I mean, we all know how big Game of Thrones was, and the actors necessarily weren't. Kit Harington wasn't really a big time name. Sophie Turner, not really a big time name. Richard Madden, not a big time name. Now all of them big time names. In fact, the All Matter, actually all three of them have starred in Marvel related projects. The two of them started in one of the films, Eternals. But like I said, I think HBO Max is really starting. All these shows are starting to get big time Hollywood actors. I know this is 2020, but Netflix got Anya Taylor-Joy. HBO Max got Mayor of Kate Winslet for Mayor of Easttown.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, HBO, they've been able to do that for a while, but I think it's still there's some just really I don't want to like step on this too much before we actually get into it, but like there've been some amazing TV experiences this year.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So
Disney Plus has done a great job too with their Marvel TV shows. I think they've done a great job with those.
Yeah, I haven't watched those as much, but I've heard really good things about them. I watched WandaVision. That was last year, I think. Was that this year? I can't remember.
No, that was 2021 March. It's been a long year.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a weird one. It's been a long and a simultaneously very short year. Somehow both things are true. I don't understand how, but somehow.
Yeah.
All right. So talk us through how you made your list this year. Like, what are the parameters you put in?
Yeah. So in order to make my list this year, I think what I did was I basically worked at the movie theater, and I was in the movie theater, and I'm able to get free tickets to watch movies, so I can just watch them whenever I want. So to do my list, really, what I did was I kind of just looked at my letterbox, and then I kind of looked about, okay, what did this movie have? What were the performances? What was the story? Kind of what did the movie do for me? And what did it do for the story? And kind of what did I take away from the experience? And I feel like that's kind of what you have to look at every movie. What did you take away from it? And I think that is something that you look at any movie. Like, did you have a good time? Did you enjoy the experience? Is there a lot you can talk about?
Yeah.
I think, sometimes even bad movies, could have been like on this list because there's a lot I took away from it, and maybe that and they're enjoyable. But in terms of but with that being said, though, I also took quality in there. Like, was it a well-made movie? Yes, that's also a factor. There's a whole multitude of factors into what I thought about for these movies.
Yeah, for me, it was this podcast isn't big enough yet for me to get hate. Maybe people will binge listen to this some years in the future when it's huge, and then they'll
when you're a successful screenwriter, they're gonna find this podcast and they're gonna go like, let's look at this podcast
for something. Yeah,
exactly.
For a choice.
And then you're not gonna get any more jobs. It's unfortunate.
But there's a lot of really great filmmaking. Like I already mentioned with Nomadland. No shade on Nomadland. It's a good movie, but like there's a lot of filmmaking that is really high quality that I just don't respond to. And so this year, I also had more TV shows than films on my list. And for me, it was all about the experience I had while watching them. It was all about how I felt when I was watching these movies and shows. And so things that, I'm sorry, but movies like Belfast, Licorice Pizza, West Side Story, King Richard, The Humans, Come On, none of those movies are going to make it on my list. And I'm sorry for that. I know a lot of people are going to be like, those, you probably just mentioned the Best Picture winner, runner-up, and several others, but I just don't respond to those kind of movies. So for me, it was just about, did I get an awe-inspiring, like, did I feel very strongly the things these filmmakers wanted me to feel? And also for me, another aspect of it is, did this make me want to write something? So a TV show, I have a love-hate relationship with actually writing, with actually sitting down and writing. And for me, a TV show that can actually inspire me to want to go get in front of my computer and write something, that is a big deal for me. So that is kind of where I base my criteria around for this one.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Taking away kind of, takeaways can be multiple things, and wanting to write something or inspired by a story. I think it's great. And I think movies is another way of reading, or books, kind of how we're inspired by that. And I feel like that's a great, example of anything like that. And TV, I mean, I say this all the time. The gap between TV and film is no longer as big as it seems now. And with the streaming services now,
it's getting closer.
Big budget TV. Exactly. It's getting closer.
I mean, especially if you look at things like Black Mirror, like that TV show is ostensibly a movie. Like, they're just like 5 movies put next to each other. They're not really, like, especially with, like, what was that? I didn't watch it, unfortunately, but like Small Axe is something people talked about a lot this year, where it's like, it's a TV show, but it's really just 5 movies. It's completely separate movies they put next to each other. And it's great. Things are blending together. And I think pretty soon video games are going to start to blend together too. But
shout out. Storytelling.
Yeah, it is. It's all about storytelling. All right, before we get into our lists, do you have any honorable mentions?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, I guess I could start honorable mentions. So I think for my honorable mentions, I probably might start with that's a good that is tough. I probably might have to go with probably In the Heights. I think In the Heights was an interesting film. I thought I want to give that an honorable mention because I think it was a good experience. I want to bring it up because I think it was a good musical made movie, and because John M. Chu is going to direct the Wicked movie, which I think will be really good. And I had issues with it, so I think it was good because I had a lot to talk about, and I think it kind of inspired me to kind of do my own thing. I think that was something that I really took away from the movie. Like, okay, what did it do well in, and what kind of worked in? And so I think it did a good job in terms of like understanding what are the priorities were in that film. And I think it was a good musical, good story, but it also kind of showed me like, okay, how can you fix this? So I think that's something, another thing movies make. As I do remember one person, I forget the director's name, but one person who says there was a guy, I don't remember the quote, but he said that a movie that if you watch a movie that you like, or there's a director who says that he watches more movies that he doesn't like than what he does like, because if he watches a movie he doesn't like, then he can't do anything with it. But if he watches a movie he doesn't like, then he can work around that and see, oh, how can I make this movie better? So I think that is something, as a filmmaker standpoint, if there's a movie I don't like, which this movie, it's not terrible, it's not like bad. I give it a 7 out of 10. And it was well received by critics, so it could potentially be a Best Picture candidate for the Oscars. I just think there were some things. Oh, not anymore. But
no one watched it.
Oh wow, I went to IMAX. Sorry. Anyways, regardless of such, I thought it was interesting in that standpoint. Another one I want to say is Green Knight. I thought Green Knight was a very, very great film, beautifully shot. The story, though,
I have real issues with the Green Knight. But you say your piece, then I want to say I've got real issues with that movie.
The story, well, I mean, I think your issue. I mean, my issues were I did have issues with it, like the story. Like, I was kind of boring, but it was pretty kind of beautifully shot. So I guess you kind of have to take it away, like symbolism and everything like that. Like I think I haven't done all the research on it, but I did like the shots of the movie, and I did like the costumes and everything like that. And the story was okay, but I think it could have been better. But
for me, I think it's interesting because it really does highlight the difference between a writer's mindset and a director's mindset, I think. And it's super interesting. I think I've noticed this a lot from other directors, that a lot of times there's a lot more consideration taken into a film. So it's not just about the story and the characters, but it's about the cinematography and the score and the underlying themes and things like that. And for me, and for I think a lot of writers I've spoken to, like, it really is, if the story isn't there or if the characters aren't there, it doesn't work for them. And that's what I had an issue with Green Knight, that I very strongly believe you have to tell a great story first, and then all of your symbolism goes on top of telling a great story. And The Green Knight was too focused on the symbolism and telling all these weird little tangents and these metaphors and connections to old pieces of literature that they never actually remembered to tell a fascinating story. And the character motivations were kind of all over the place. And if you can't, I always say this, if I have to watch an article or read an article in order to understand what happened in your movie, the story of your movie, and really get that, it's not a good movie for me. Like I want to be able to watch it at its level and then do the research after that to find the more like subtle things like themes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. I think that was one of the problems I had with the movie. Like, I didn't like, I think the story wasn't quite there, and I feel like it was doing more than it was. It was, I mean, to say it was like an art film, an experimental film, I guess you could advertise it as that, but
they didn't advertise it like that. They advertised it like it was a big budget kind of like fantasy film, like a Game of Thrones type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And but that's if you're, yeah, and that's, really quickly, I'm going to run through my honorable mentions. Go
ahead.
Real quick. Just shout out if you have any ideas, if you have any thoughts on them. So first up is Spencer, which I thought, I'm not a biopic guy, so I was like almost didn't bother with Spencer, but it really isn't a biopic in a traditional sense. It's more of, I don't know what to call it. I know I've already shouted out Sean Fennessy at The Ringer. He called it a horror movie. I think that's dead wrong, but it certainly borrows elements from those more genre filmmaking types of films. And I don't really know what to call it at the end of the day, but I thought it was very interesting and I was very pleasantly surprised by that one. Have you seen Spencer?
I actually haven't, but I will love to see it at some point.
Yeah. Next up is The White Lotus, which I just thought it somehow like towed the line of being perfectly like a beach read of a film, of a TV show, but also telling like introducing real complex themes about a class and white privilege and all these things, but not doing it in a way that felt preachy, and really giving each character the time to be human and then also be a caricature. And I thought it was just very interesting about that.
Yeah, White Lotus, I think, is a TV show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
I just got HBO Max, so I got a lot of binging.
You gotta watch it, man. It's a good one.
A lot of binging to do.
Yeah. So The French Dispatch. This is actually the first Wes Anderson movie I'd ever seen all the way through. Well,
me too.
Yeah, I think I saw Fantastic Mr. Fox when I was a kid, and I didn't like it as a kid because I was like, "This is not what I want out of a kids movie." But
it's actually based off a kid's book, and I actually saw that.
I know, because I liked the book a lot, and then I watched the movie, and I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" But I think if I watched it today, it'd be good. But French Dispatch, very good, very. I think if you want kind of if you want to show someone like, what is Wes Anderson? This seems like a good movie to be like, this is Wes Anderson. It's like the most little Wes Anderson pieces put together. So I thought that was a very interesting watch. None of the stories were interesting enough that I would want a feature film of them, but I thought as like small chunks, they worked really well.
All right.
And last but not least is Night House, which I was just very surprised by. The title is kind of like odd, and so I kind of expected it to be like a B-rated crappy horror movie, but it's very effective. And what I find interesting about horror movies, kind of how I gauge my metric with horror movies, is are they able to take something that we don't usually find terrifying and make it terrifying, and if so, is that thing they're making terrifying interesting? So like A Quiet Place did that for sound, and like noise is what kills you. Bird Box did it with birds. I don't know, sight. That wasn't a great movie.
Yeah.
But like all of these kind of the best horror movies, I think Candyman did a very good job of doing that with mirrors, making you scared of mirrors. Every time you saw a mirror, it was dangerous. Night House does that very effectively with negative space and stuff not being there. And I don't want to spoil anything about the movie. I'm gonna try to keep this a non-spoiler podcast, but like, I thought it did a very interesting job of like making you scared of seeing nothing. And that was the scare, was when there was nothing to see. And I thought that's just very, very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when that movie came out, I didn't really think too much of it. I actually didn't bother seeing it. Not a big horror movie guy, but
Yeah.
I might see it. Rebecca Hall. Not too familiar with her work, but I might check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hear you.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we will be right back with our top 5. All right, and we are back. So, Sabur, what was your top 5 favorite film or TV show of this year?
So top 5, I'm probably gonna go with The Quiet Place, part 2.
Yeah.
More specifically.
Yeah.
I really like this film. I think it was so good. And because I think I wanted to watch it because it was in the theaters. I'm like, this could be an interesting film. So I remember I watched the first one and I really loved the first one. And then I watched the second one and I actually loved both of them. And like I think what I like so much about The Quiet Place was because like you said, the sound, I thought that was really good. Just how they handled that, and also kind of how they created like this world where like the aliens are kind of the aliens are blind, but they're very attracted to sound, and so kind of like what they had to do in order to survive. And I think they did a good job establishing what they had to do to survive in this world. And I think that was great. And I think it was really great for the characters in the film because I really think they kind of took a step forward in this film. They kind of like showed themselves. And I think it was also you also got a background to like how the aliens kind of came or something like that. You kind of got that. I think that was really cool. You also got just like what I think was great about the film is you saw the characters kind of making that huge change, like a huge progression. And I feel like you watch any film, or I guess this is essentially maybe now a story that's being told in 3 different movies, or one story told in 3 different movies, because the way that the first film ended, it kind of like there's also something that's left to be desired. So I think the story, I don't know if John Krasinski intentionally wanted it, the film to be, I don't know if he wanted to be 3 movies, but I guess that's how it is now. And the way that they handle that, I think it's amazing, because this is kind of like if this movie, let's say it's combined into one like 9-hour or however long movie it is, this is like the climax where the characters are kind of making I think that the characters are kind of making that change. So I think what I like about this movie is how the characters made that jump and change. You got more clarity for the aliens, because I think John Krasinski thought, hey, if we're gonna make it more movies, why don't we give clarity to what happened? And I like how creative just the characters were, and the acting was incredible. And I think what John Krasinski, I don't know if he mentioned this first one, but I liked how he cast a deaf actor to play his deaf daughter in the movie. And I thought that was really cool, and she did a great job in that in her performance. I thought that was really great. So really, I just loved the way that what happened. And I love the sound design of the movie. I think the sound design was so great. And
that's definitely
I just love the movie. I thought it was great, and it's a really good horror movie too.
I think you're right. Sound is definitely the king for that movie. I definitely had my issues with that second film. I think a lot of those issues was just based around hype, and that the movie was carrying so much weight on its shoulders, because it was basically, there were a lot of first films back. I just heard someone say that West Side Story is the first film back, which I just thought was ridiculous because there've been so many. But A Quiet Place Part 2.
The first film back?
Like from COVID. Sorry, like the first big film back. Like, sorry. But A Quiet Place Part 2 was like really the first major film back from COVID. And I think it was carrying so much weight that, at least for me, I think I was putting more on it than it deserved to have and needed to have. But I definitely thought it was pretty effective in parts. I thought there were some very tense sequences. There's definitely some very interesting use. They're very good about being very economical with their sound and their scares, and they still kept the monsters were still relatively hidden throughout most of it. You definitely saw more of them, but it wasn't explosive and huge. And I did think it was a pretty solid sequel. That one didn't make my list, but my number 5 is Hacks. And that is my top pick for TV shows that you can just sit with the characters. And I know there's a lot of directors and writers don't like shows like these anymore. There's a lot of stigma against them. That's the old way of doing TV. That's not how we do it anymore. But I just want, at the end of the day, to go. I think there's a place for it. Doesn't have to be garbage like trashy like ABC stuff, but it also doesn't have to be extremely serialized, extremely prestige, like frankly uninteresting art films. And I think Hack shows, and I think Hacks really hits that sweet spot of just being very, very, like, you want to spend the time with these characters, you want to be in their presence at all times, but it also tells a story, it progresses us through, we really care about these characters, they grow and change, but I can turn on any episode of that show and just sit with them and enjoy the warm feeling that kind of like courses through me at that moment. So Hacks was kind of my fifth favorite experience of watching media this year. Have you seen Hacks? Have you experienced that at all?
I believe that's on HBO Max, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so you probably just got it. It's another one to add to the list then.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think what you're saying about you know, definitely something that I want to see. Kind of when you talk about like you could just watch the movie, watch the TV show, excuse me, and like just kind of do that. I think that's, you know, what you're describing with the TV show. I think that's great because I think sometimes, you know, TV, you can't, I mean, even though we, like we said, the gap between TV and film is kind of, you know, slowing down. I think as Hacks, you know, from what you said and from what I've heard about it, it's like, I think, you know, TV shows sometimes are not supposed to be like, you know, they could be whatever you want them to be, but sometimes TV shows can be just something you can just turn on and you can just, you know, have fun with the characters and just ease into it. And, you know, I think that's something that I think the show can bring. And I think that's what a lot of people want in the shows. You know, it's why so many people like The Office, why some people like the Parks and Rec, because you can just turn it on, and Seinfeld, and just, you know, have fun with the characters. Just be, you know, hang out with some characters for however many episodes or however long it is. And I feel like sometimes that's all it is.
Yeah, but what I think is so amazing about Hacks is that it does both. So it does the, I just want to sit with these characters and they're really just fun to hang out with. But yet it also treats them with real humanity. You know, this isn't, you know, I love The Devil Wears Prada, great movie, but it isn't that. It isn't like this character, this well-intentioned character faces off against pure evil, which is, I think, it's a way you kind of, it's definitely a comp, you would say. It's The Devil Wears Prada, but it's in Vegas. And Hacks isn't like that. It gives both of these characters like redeeming qualities and both of them flaws, and they both have something to teach the other one, which is so interesting. And they're, instead of this woman, the Jean Smart's character, and I can't believe I'm blanking on her name, Deborah Vance, instead of Deborah Vance just teaching this writer like how to not be an asshole, or instead of this writer just teaching Deborah Vance not to be like a boomer, you know, that they are both teaching each other something real, and they do that all while simultaneously being just entertaining and fun. And that is something that is a really fine line, a really tough line to walk, I think, in shows.
Yeah. I hear you. And I think it was nominated for a couple Emmys, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was. I think it won something, but I could be wrong, because I think Jean Smart maybe won for her part, maybe.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I definitely hear you on that. You know, definitely something to keep in mind for sure.
What was your fourth favorite film of the year?
So my fourth favorite film, I'm probably gonna have to say No Time to Die. I think No Time to Die is my fourth favorite film. So going into this film, I think it was interesting, because you know, in the podcast that I made, which I talked about, I think it made me watch more movies because, you know, hey, maybe we could talk about it. So No Time to Die, I always wanted to get into James Bond, you know, because I know it's like he's a fan favorite character. He's loved by so many people. I think, you know, I think this film was so interesting. It was so interesting because of like kind of like you kind of have this summary kind of like a closing. It's like the finished movie, the epilogue. I won't say epilogue, but more of like this epic final last hurrah, last crusade, whatever it is. And I think what was interesting about this movie was kind of the journey it made me take on. Because like, okay, I want to see this movie because we're playing it and I have time and all my friends are telling me to watch it. I'm like, okay, I'll go watch this. So what I did was I binge watched all 4 of the movies. And so what I like this movie so much is because of the journey it took me on, for what the movie is. Like I watched Casino Royale, I watched Quantum of Solace, I watched Skyfall, and I watched what was the last one? I think it was Spectre. and then
Yeah.
I watched No Time to Die. So I like this movie. Not missing now. The movie itself, I can get into that. The movie itself, I think it was great. I think the movie was great. It was 3 hours long, but I think it was really captivating. It kept you, engaged for so long. The reason why this movie is not higher than why it is because of the villain. I mean, the only bad thing about this was the villain. The villain, there were two technically villains in the movie. The main villain was Rami Malek. The other character was Christoph Waltz's character Blofeld. The two things I think it's kind of interesting because I love what they did with Blofeld's character because Spectre was not a good movie, and they kind of, I wouldn't say retconned the character, but they kind of brought the character in better light. They kind of rewrote him, like he was well written in this movie. However, the problem was because they did so much work on rewriting him, forgot about Rami Malek's character, and I couldn't understand his motive for destroying the world or whatever. I didn't like that. But apart from that, I loved, the mission Bond went on, the kind of, closure for his life, closure. It was really just about closure, finding out, to finally putting Spectre to the end and then stopping the other evil agency that he was in there. Because apparently Spectre has been.
Sorry, we're getting very close to spoiler territory.
Okay. Well, the movie is all about, him just, I guess, thank you for catching that.
Yeah.
And, it's on DVDs now, so apologies. But yeah, the movie is great. It's really just about a wrap up of his journey throughout the 4 films. I think that's great. And I think that's what it is. It's a proper send off for the character. And it really just brings closure to him. And it really brings all 5 movies together. And I think that's great. However, I think why I love it so much is because it introduced me to a movie that I love so much a lot now is Skyfall. Skyfall, I think, is definitely in my top 10 of all time, maybe top 15.
Wow.
I don't know. I have to rework my top 15, but it's so good. And the reason why it's so good is because Javier Bardem. Javier Bardem is probably one of my favorite actors now. He's definitely my top 5. I love Javier Bardem. Javier Bardem is great, and he was a great job as a villain. And that movie stands out as the best because it's kind of a standalone movie. It doesn't really interact with all the other 4 movies. They don't really talk about any of. They don't really. It doesn't really. It sometimes acknowledges the previous 2, but it doesn't not really. It's kind of a standalone movie, and I feel like that's good. So I appreciate No Time to Die for that. But I think if you guys like if you guys really like No Time to Die, or if you guys really like James Bond, I think this movie is so great because of the end, because of just the story it has, and because of closure of the character. And I'm so grateful that Daniel Craig decided to come back and do it one more time because I know he was having a fight. No, I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
But they're like money, and he's like, okay, fine, I'll take money, and then
money is
and
good.
then. And I think also he did it because Sector was not well received by many, and I'm like, you know what? Let me do it one more time to give people justice. So
yeah.
I think he did a great job with justice, and sending this character off, sending the character, having his character, have a good closure to the whole his whole story.
Yeah,
that he was on in the first movie.
Yeah. All right. My number 4.
Any thoughts on No Time to Die? Sorry, Sana.
No, you're good. I like No Time to Die. I thought it was a very solid. I'm not a huge James Bond person. I definitely enjoyed the film. I thought I definitely agree. I hear what you're saying about Rami Malek. I agree. I think, look, James Bond villains are a stereotype for a reason. They're the mustache twirling bad guys who often just want chaos because chaos. And so I think he lived up to the legacy of those villains very well. But I agree, it was not those movies, because I think they sometimes lack character development and they sometimes lack real stakes, or the real stakes, but actual stakes that we care about. I think that I don't respond to them super well. But no, I really enjoyed No Time to Die. I thought it was a really solid film, really just fun to go sit in a movie theater for 3 hours and car chases, explosions. It was one of those great back to movies moments for me this year. See it in an IMAX theater, crowded IMAX theater. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. My number 4 is Mayor of Easttown. This is another HBO show, so you probably haven't seen it
Nope.
because of the new HBO Max. But so HBO does these every couple of years, twice a year, probably, I'd say, where they do a show that it's basically like a murder mystery. and it's like a cop procedural, but like with a prestige element. Sometimes it's a miniseries, sometimes it's a there's multiple seasons, but usually it's maximum 3 or 4 seasons. So like Big Little Lies, The Undoing, The Outsider, Landscapers is a new one. They do these all the time. They're all very good. They're all solid. The Night Of, that's another one. And they're all very good. They're all very solid, like crime procedurals with a prestige element to them. And that's kind of what I went into Mare of Easttown expecting. I was like, oh, it's like HBO's 2021, like summer 2021 crime show. And it's so much more than that. This show is maybe one of the best, like, just best made TV shows I've ever seen. It handles exposition in a way I've never seen other shows or movies doing exposition, where, without getting into spoiler territory, most shows that deal with exposition, they're telling it that if you have good exposition, you're hiding it. You're hiding it in the dialogue. You're hiding expositional moments in the dialogue, but your goal is still to tell people what's going on. Mare of Easttown handles exposition very differently, where it actively leans into the kind of assumptions we make about characters and character relationships and how they interact with one another, and then it uses those to create twists where we the audience create all of these assumptions about who characters are in relation to one another at the beginning of the show, and it has the gall to like wait until episode 4 to be like, well, we never explicitly said that this is this person's mother rather than their sister or whatever, and that's not an actual thing, but that's an example. And then it puts the entire show in a new context. I've never really seen that done as beautifully as they do in Mare of Easttown. It just shows such grasp over narrative. So they go into the killer gets revealed in episode 3 of 6, which is just, or at the beginning of episode 4 or something. So there's a solid 2 episodes of show where the killers, you know who the killers are. And there are some like twists, there's definitely some twists that happen before then, but they just do so much. They just do so much brilliant writing that just completely subverts the genre of this kind of prestige procedural cop drama they do at HBO. And I can't recommend it enough. It is a brilliant piece of filmmaking with beautiful performances, of course.
I wish I could say.
Yeah.
Wish I could say.
Just great. They're great. Yeah. Every time you think you know what's going to happen in that show, it doesn't. And they go a completely different direction. And yet the mark of a good TV show, that they go in a completely different direction, but that is simultaneously the only direction they could have gone in that would make sense. And it is just, I can't talk about it any more highly than that. All right, Sabur, what is your third favorite film this year?
All right, my third favorite film. Now we're getting into kind of, I don't know if it's stereotypical, but my third favorite film this year is King Richard. King Richard, I really enjoyed this film. I think a lot of people thought this would kind of be like an Oscar bait film. That's what I guess most people, I mean, not myself, but a lot of people thought about this. I think this was a really, really great film. I liked it so much, and there's a multitude of reasons. First of all, I think the story, I think to most people, the story kind of is not as interesting. I mean, I thought it was very interesting, or it's kind of maybe I don't know if it's stereotypical or anything like that, but I think the story had a good source material. Nonetheless, it had really good source material, and the reason why is because you have these 2 famous athletes, Serena and Venus Williams. Both of them are very highly respected in both of their fields. I think they're both tennis players. Serena is arguably one of the best female tennis players of all time. Venus is not bad either. She's like, I think, top 5, top 10 as well. And I think the source material is interesting. And I found it really interesting. So I think that's why, number one, why I was interested in seeing this. And then you kind of have Will Smith. And Will Smith, we all love Will Smith. We know him as, Men in Black, Independence Day, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The list goes on, for his more comedic roles. I think that's what we know him from. But we know he can also be a dramatic actor. Films like Ali, or like The Pursuit of Happiness, or Concussion. We know that he can be this. So I think that was an interesting factor. And obviously the movie was more in the lines of, a more dramatic tone. And that's something that I saw. So I really think this film did a great job with I think Will Smith specifically did a great job with handling, taking on this dramatic role. and he did a great job just kind of portraying himself as this, the character of the father. And
Mhm.
I really think the story was so interesting because of kind of where Venus and Serena came from. And I
Yeah.
think you really kind of understand. And I feel like Will Smith did a great job of understanding where they were from, but also kind of pushing them to kind of be, the tennis players that they are. I really think you see that kind of growth. And I think that is
Yeah.
something that I love from the movie is the efforts that you see from Will Smith. Like he does a great job acting by pushing, Serena and Venus, the actresses, by the way, they played them, were great. I think
Mhm.
he did such a great job with that story, and they paid really good homage to the source material, paying really good homage to what the characters look like and everything like that, and really just did a great job with portraying the importance of them. And biopics are hard to get by. Some people don't like them as much. I thought this was a really great job, just because of what the movie was trying to do. I think it did a great
Yeah.
job, and it handled that with the great performances. So I think
Yeah.
it was great because of the performances and because of what you kind of really got to see where Serena and Venus came from and why why their father pushed them to be so good, because he knew they would be so good.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
great film. Great film.
I have not seen King Richard. I almost fired it up on HBO Max one night, and then these movies just don't speak to me. This is the only one on your list I think that I haven't seen, and I'm sure it's a fantastic movie. I'm sure it's great. But yeah, these ones don't speak to me. All right. So my third favorite film is the actual first film I've had on my list. I keep saying film, even though mine have been shows so far. My third favorite film was Dune, and I don't know what I have. You've seen Dune, I assume.
I have seen Dune.
It is just massive in scope, and it was just. I mentioned when you were talking about No Time to Die that it was nice to be back in a theater full of people. Dune, I saw No Time to Die in IMAX, and I got a little bit of that tingly, like, oh my god, I'm back in a movie theater. I saw Dune in a digital theater, so not IMAX, with a much smaller crowd, and the entire movie nonstop, I was having those tingly, I'm back, this is a movie feelings. The score is just gorgeous, and I think it does a lot of work to make this film as epic as it is. But Denis Villeneuve he may be the single best cinematographer. He's not a cinematographer, but he may have the single best cinematography eye of any director working today. I think at least for super flashy cinematography, there's something to be said for smaller scaled back visuals as well. But in terms of just sprawling epic cinematography, he is the best. And this movie, there's definitely arguments to be made that Timothée Chalamet's character is not necessarily the most original or interesting. And then there's counter arguments to be made that Dune came out long before Star Wars or Harry Potter or any of these other things that have this boy wizard storyline. And I see both sides, but I think there's just something I've always said that the movie that made me want to make movies was Harry Potter, not The Godfather, not Star Wars, not anything like that. It was Harry Potter, and I think it's this there's some itch that those books scratch that I felt like I never felt that again. A little bit during the Hunger Games, but until this Dune film, it is just I cannot talk about more highly. It was just an amazing movie. What do you think of Dune?
Yeah, I saw Dune 2. I thought about including in my list. I think it's definitely it's definitely an honorable mention that I didn't mention. But it's an honorable mention for me. I think Dune was a really good film in terms of that, cinematic masterpiece. I think it was that. I think the cinematography was phenomenal. I hope it wins all awards for cinematography, because I think what Dune is I think Dune it's based off a book of novels. And it's not I hope this is not a spoiler, but there is a sequel coming out. So I don't. That's just general
Dune
news.
Part 2, baby. Yeah.
So this is a part 1 movie. So I didn't know this, and many people didn't know this, but this is a part. I guess like a part 1 movie essentially. And so it's basically kind of an introduction to this world. And I feel like it did a great job, in terms of what it needed to be, in terms of an introduction to experiencing these new characters. And I think it did a great job establishing what the characters are and who the villains were for this story. Now, in terms of the movie, cinematically, I think it was great. You kind of got to experience, these different worlds with Arrakis. I think the costumes were amazing. You kind of felt like you were in this different world. And I gratefully was able to see it in IMAX. Now IMAX was packed. It was crazy. So it wasn't like, I wasn't the most comfortable, if you know what I mean, but I was in IMAX still. But I think it was great. And when you're in IMAX, you really get that sound design and the loud sound. And it really makes you experience everything. So the sound is also another thing that I liked in this movie, was the sound. And I think that was probably the best part, because you really were engaged. And one thing that we always like in movies is that feeling of being immersed. And I feel like the movie did a great job immersing yourself in the movie. And that's something that I took away from this movie, of being immersed. And I love the movie for that. I think it was so good. Being immersed in the movie, I think it was really good. The one thing that I didn't like, and many people think, I was like, it kind of, even though it was an introduction movie, which I realized, it kind of didn't really have a lot of action. It kind of had like an action like towards the climax, but when the action did happen, so I think the pacing is kind of the only thing I didn't like about the movie. That's why I would have it higher, is the pacing. But apart from that, like everything else was so good about the movie, and the characters were really well written, I have to say. Now this is based off source material, but Denis Villeneuve did a great job adapting it, and I think that's really, really great stuff. But great movie overall. I think it was phenomenal.
All right, what's your number two?
Number two. Okay, now this is, I told you this prior. This has nothing to do with you working at Ridley Scott. This is just me actually liking the movie. All right.
Of course.
I love Last Duel. Last Duel, I really liked it. I know
we have a podcast about Last Duel. You should go listen.
Oh,
link
yes.
Link in the down below, show notes.
Yes, we made a podcast on it. He and him. This is how we kind of met too, and that's interesting. But Last Duel was so good, and I know technically, I mean, I even though like there are other movies I may have necessarily like maybe more than it, cinematically made better, but I think this movie was, in terms of better, I think I have it number two because of the experience I had. So I always say this: when I was in the movie, I was crunching on water bottle and M&Ms. M&Ms, classic thing, go-to thing. I loved it. And when I talk about immersion, I was really, really immersed in this movie. I was so immersed in this movie. I think it was great. And I think what made this movie so good is because it really immersed you in the movie, because you really got to feel for the characters, but also because of the unique style of way this movie was told. This movie was shot so differently than kind of what I was expecting and what most people were expecting, as you kind of got to see like, different parts of the story kind of go in there. And it's also interesting because you got to really focus on the different perspectives of each character. It's like everyone's, like, I liked how it was told through someone's different point of view. And when that happened, you kind of learn more and more about the plot, and you kind of learn more and more about people's relationships. And I think that was so interesting. And you and I have described this before on our podcast. We were both on the edge of our seats, and I mean, any movie, you're on the edge of the seats. I'll take that any day of the week. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, I was stressed out. I wasn't sure, but like, just the way that the movie made me feel, I think it did a great job immersing myself, and that's why I have to put it number two. And also the unique way it was told, like the way it was shot. And your boss, I guess he's your boss, Ridley Scott. He did a great job.
4 days.
he did a great job shooting this film. I loved it. I loved it so much. It really immersed you. I think, and it's unfortunate that not many people got to see this movie. Well, I'll tell you what, it's not because it's not a good movie. No, that is dead wrong. It is a great movie. Please check it out if you haven't. And it's not because Sam works for Scott, because he technically doesn't do that anymore. So this is just me recommending the movie. It's great. Your thoughts?
My thought, I mean, we went over this for like again an hour and a half on your pod. So I'm most of my thoughts I've already shared, but I think it was very interesting. For me, movies like this need to be shorter, and I think one thing about The Last Duel is that it felt short because of how it was structured. So it's structured, this is not really a spoiler, it's structured as 3 chapters. So it's this one event happening through the eyes of one person, then another and another. And to me, some people said that made it feel longer. To me, that made it feel much faster. So I found it much more like watching 3 episodes of a TV show than watching a 2.5 hour long movie, which is too long for a movie, guys. Too long for a movie. Come on, hour 45. Let's go. But I thought that, Ridley is an amazing director, and he really knows how to direct these action sequences. And yet, this movie is so much more than an action sequence. Sequence, and he somehow is able to do both. So he has this big action sequence, and you see it at the beginning, and then you see it again at the end, and everything that happens in between these two action sequences, or the same action sequence told twice, is what convinces you, which completely changes the way you're looking at the action sequence. So that is, I think, super interesting, how he plays with your ideas about who you should root for and who these characters are and why you should care about them. And very, very solid movie. Really enjoyed The Last Duel.
Yeah, great movie again. Check it out. It's phenomenal.
All right, my number 2.
Your number 2, Sam.
Yes, my number 2 is Succession season 3, and I almost want to play the theme song here because it is the best theme song. It's another HBO. I realize all of my TV shows here are HBO shows. In fact, I'm repping Warner hard. 4 out of my 5 are Warner, or AOL, AT&T, Warner. So
I'm definitely. What would think of Warner? Isn't it Warner Discovery now too? It's confusing.
Yes, now. Yeah. I think at the time they were AT&T, but yes, Discovery. Who knows? Shine.
It's Warner Brothers. It's the big WB. That
one. Those guys. But no, Succession is, it is. I think it's the best show on television. I think it is the next Game of Thrones. I really do think that. It is obviously not to the same extent where there are just the entire world is watching it. I don't think the finale of Succession is going to garner as much attention as the finale of Game of Thrones. I also think the finale of Succession is going to be better than the finale of Game of Thrones. And this show is so able to, it starts out, you think the season is going to go in one direction. Every season starts out in a very similar fashion, and they really go to some interesting places where you're like, they're going to change this show up and they're going to make it something completely different. And then at the end of the season, they manage to pull it back and bring you back to basically the status quo. They have slight variations, and definitely it doesn't feel like it's just repeating the same thing every season, but they managed to bring it back towards a similar driving force at the end of the show. And I think that's just an amazing party trick the show pulls, that it is able to do that without making me hate it, because there's so many shows. There was the show I watched in high school called Revolution, and the whole show is about, and I will spoil this one because it's so long ago, but the whole point of that show is all the power in the world is shut off and they're trying to turn it back on. And in the season finale of the show, they turn the power back on. And in the very first episode of season 2, they turn it off again. And something happens and they have to turn it off. And it is just the cheapest trick that anyone ever pulled. Succession does a very similar thing, but I love it. And it's able to do it where it makes just enough change. So going into the next season, there's just enough of the shift that you still care about these characters. They're so amazing. The performances are amazing. And it just does this where it's telling the same story, but it's doing it in just enough of a character dynamics and who is on what side going into the new season that it really doesn't matter. It's just amazing. Succession, can't recommend it enough. It's close to a perfect show. It's not perfect, but it's close to a perfect show. All right, Sabur, what is your favorite film of 2021?
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm a film student. I am aware of that, but I am but the reason why I got into films is multiple reasons. One of them was superheroes, and my number one film has to be Spider-Man: No Way Home. Look, nice. I think this movie. Let me just say this: this movie is Spider-Man Endgame. I mean, that's what most people said. This movie is a collection of. The movie is a movie from years and years in the making, and it's like my childhood all over again almost. This movie had everything, and I know I'm not going to say any spoilers because this movie you got to see, you have to experience everything firsthand. I mean, this movie is everything. Like, I mean, I can't say much about it. Is it going to get nominated for Oscars? Maybe not. I mean,
No.
I think it should, but maybe not. But this movie is so good because I think it just pays homage to, first and foremost, all the fans of Marvel and all the fans of Spider-Man, the character. I think it does such a good job with first that, and I think it just makes you understand kind of who Spider-Man is. I think that is what this movie does. It really understands the core and what separates Spider-Man from all these different heroes.
Mhm.
And I feel like that is something that this movie really emphasized on. This
Yeah.
movie really, really emphasized on that thought of why Spider-Man is not like Iron Man, why he's not like Captain America, why he's not like all the other Marvel heroes. It really shows you.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that was done really well. And by
Yeah.
bringing back all the villain characters, I think that's really good because it gets these villain characters a proper send-offs, essentially. So I think that's really, really great in that respect. But yeah, like it's a collection of multiple years of the Spider-Man character.
Mhm.
It brings so much Easter egg, so much comic book fan, but I think it just does a great job of doing that, appreciating all the fans, accommodating for everybody.
Yeah.
And it also has great themes in the movie, and it just really shows you of who Spider-Man is on display. And I think
Yeah.
there's multiple forms of media that have done that, and this might be one of the best ones, probably. Like
Yeah.
it's so good. And Spider-Man's is no stranger danger to having great movies. Into the Spider-Verse, into Spider-Man 2. I don't know, is it better than those films? Maybe, honestly, because of just what it does. And I think this is something. I think it's I know Marvel's maybe not being the greatest in cinematic masterpieces, but this movie just it had a collection of multiple different collection of multiple years in the making, and it really showed you who Spider-Man is as a character. And I feel like that
Mhm.
is why I love this movie so much. That's
Yeah.
like without giving away any spoilers, that's really what
Yeah.
I can say about the movie.
Yes.
Uh,
Um,
I know you saw this actually a couple days
I
ago.
did. I saw it. Yeah, recently because we're recording this on December 20th, and it came out I think the 17th. So I just saw it. Um,
I saw it on
yeah.
Thursday.
What?
I saw it Thursday. I think you saw it Thursday too, right?
Yeah, I think we might have seen it the same day. Um, yeah, this movie it's a great Spider-Man movie. I think this movie had everything. It had everything from the like big cinematic moments, the moments where people literally just shriek insanely in the theater. I thought there were some girls behind me during one moment that I'm sure we both know the moment I'm talking about, where I thought they were gonna
Yes.
die. Like seemed like they were gonna have a heart attack. And it also manages, I think it manages to keep the story surprisingly grounded on these three central characters of Spider-Man, MJ, and Ned. And I really think it does a great job of that, of really making this the story of these three people, because in a lot of these films, the main character kind of gets lost. So like Captain America Civil War is not a Captain America movie, it's Avengers Civil War. And you said it's Spider-Man Endgame. And in a way that's true, but it's still very much Peter Parker's story. And it's still very much Doctor Strange is out of the movie for a good chunk of it. And all of these things that we thought were going to be filling the movie up too much and making it messy really kind of go away towards the end. And it becomes this story of these three characters and their relationship and trying to solve the relationship. I also thought it did a very good job, likewise, like kind of on the same tangent as this, threading the needle between being the sequel to Far From Home and Homecoming, that were these much smaller kind of friendly neighborhood Spider-Man stories, and being the newest Avengers film, basically. And I thought it did a very good job of being both of those things, of being having the like, oh, they're trying to get into college and how will they get accepted, and also doing the huge world ending stakes without ever resorting to a beam in the sky. I thought I was very worried about this film. Not really worried, because I kind of like I'm no longer passionately following Marvel, but I was like I thought the movie was going to be really bad, because Eternals was not great, and they were shooting Spider-Man. They were shooting like pickups for Spider-Man like 2 weeks ago. It was crazy, the quick turnaround. They were working on this film until the very last minute, and you can definitely tell there are some shots where you can tell the CGI is half baked. It definitely had the least polish to me of any Marvel movie, where there were a lot of moments where I'm like, ooh, that was not finished. But it doesn't matter because the story is there. And at the end of the day, all the CGI in the world can't paper over a bad story, and all the bad CGI in the world, well, it could if it's bad enough, but all the bad CGI in the world can't really paper over a great story. And this is a great story.
I love what you said about the three characters of Peter, Ned, and MJ, and I feel like that's something that I didn't talk about, and I think that's something that's important. And I think that both of these stories, you kind of also have these cinematic growths, and I feel like this movie really was focused on that, and I think that's something that they really focused on. And I like how after this, after you've seen this movie, what they do for the character overall. Going forward as well. So
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
that's something great. But
It's gonna be
guys, go
interesting.
watch this movie.
Yeah.
It's great. You'll have a great time.
Yeah. All right, my number one
Here we go.
is Titan. And this movie was a lock for my favorite of the year from, I think, the moment I saw it, the moment I stepped out of the theater. I am a sucker for a visceral theatrical experience, and this movie has a visceral theatrical experience. There were moments where I was just curled up against I was like right on the side of the theater. I was like right against kind of, like the curtain wall thing they have in the theater. And I was like, there were moments where I was like curled up against it, like hugging the curtain, trying to like not look, but also look. There were moments where I was like, I jumped. There were moments where I like laughed, where I don't know if I cried, but like there were just so many different visceral reactions I had throughout the course of this movie. And that is really what cinema is about for me, is just having these reactions that are so intense without expecting you're going to have them from this experience. So you can go into a movie like a rom-com and be like, there's going to be funny and you're going to be sad. There's going to be one, but they're all going to come together. Titan was a complete unknown entity for me. The premise of this film is so bizarre, and I don't actually think it's a spoiler to say, but do you know what this film's about, Sabur?
Not really. The only thing I know about this film is it's a hard movie.
So this is a movie about a woman, and this is not a spoiler, because another thing about this film is that the premise for 30 minutes is a very different film from the premise of the rest of the film. At the break into two, something happens, and it is a completely different film for the rest of it. Some might not like it as much. It's definitely very like, it goes from like slashery and kind of like intense, almost funny kind of horror, but horror is not really the right word, like thriller comedy, to like this really like emotional portrait of a father and a daughter. And it does so brilliantly. But the premise of this film is essentially this woman has sex with cars and gets pregnant with a car's baby and goes on the run with this baby car that is growing inside of her body. This is the premise of this serious film that was the French entrant into the Oscars for this year. And it is the single greatest thing I've seen in a very long time. It not only does it like totally deliver on that premise in the most shocking and just bizarre ways possible, but there are so like I could sit here and talk for 10 minutes, like spoil this movie for 10 minutes straight, explain to you everything I can remember, and there's still going to be like 50 different amazing elements that I forgot to mention that will make every scene is a Hall of Fame scene in Titan. And I think I saw Titan first, and I watched her other film, Julia Dejournaux's other film, Raw, after that. And Raw it's a different, it again has a very fantastical premise and a wild premise, and that one's a little bit more close to like, this is a horror film. But at the end, both of her films are stories of family, and they are stories of whether they're family by birth or found family. In the case of Titan, they are stories of family and about broken people coming together and finding a way to mend themselves together. And it's a movie about a woman who fucks cars is also one of the most heartwarming experiences of this year, and that is insane. And this movie I could talk about for another 2 hours because it is a fantastic piece of art.
Yeah, Only knowledge I have of the movie is couple things. My friend told me, or he posted on his story while he was making his movie. He was shooting his horror movie, and he's like, "Time to go relax." And then his review of the movie was, "This movie was not a relaxing movie." And then I was
Nope.
working usher. I was working in the theater that day, and this one guy told me that he was gonna go take a smoke because this movie was so a hard movie. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but
It is tough to watch.
I
There are definitely moments where there are some scenes where it is just like, I don't know how people have those ideas for things they can do to characters, if that makes sense. Like, there's some movies like Saw, for instance, where just brutal things happen, and it's kind of done in a tongue-in-cheek, like almost like Rube Goldberg machine kind of way that doesn't take itself too seriously. This movie goes there with some truly brutal sequences where I'm like, oh, I cannot imagine, I would never in a million years imagine that a human could do this to another human. And it somehow is not played for laughs, but it's still hilarious. And this movie goes, from like the most brutal thing you've ever seen to a laugh out loud comedy in 30 seconds. It is a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'd love to check it out. Again, you're done with college. I'm still in college, so I have to find time. I gotta watch all those HBO shows, and I will definitely watch Titan. Definitely in for that.
So good. All right. So before we go, where can people find you online? And I always like to add this little curveball. What's one way they can get a response out of you, and one way to guarantee you delete their message?
You said guaranteed delete their message?
Yeah. So like, what's a good way of reaching out in a bad way?
Oh, okay. Well, here's the way they can reach me. Well, I have an Instagram, Sabur, SABUR Tahir, one at that's my Instagram. If you guys so if you guys want to follow me, because there's a lot of if you guys want to follow me or whatever, because it's a private account, because college student or whatever, you just let me know who you guys are by like fan of the Screenwriter podcast, and we can have a conversation and whatnot. And you said what could have me? Well, if you state from where you're from, like who you are, like fan of the Screenwriter podcast, I think that is something that you kind of go from there. So I think that's what it is. So just you got to state where you're from and everything like that. Or that's probably what I would say. Just that. But other than that, if I don't know you and you say hey or something, sometimes I'll be nice. I'll go like, "What's up? Can I do for you?" But if you kind of just are a little scary or something, then sometimes I get scared. But just people who are listening to this, I would love to talk to you guys. I assume these are all friends of Sam's and adult screenwriters. I'm a director screenwriter myself. Go to Emerson College. I hate to say this, but it is one of the best film schools in the nation. So always there. But yeah, you want to follow or whatever, just fan of the pod, and I'll let you all through, and we can have a nice intellectual conversation about life and films.
Wonderful. All right, Sabur, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat about your favorite entertainment of 2021. And guys, if you haven't listened to Sabur's podcast, Express and Refresh, go take a listen. A link to both of the episodes that we did together, deep dives on The Last Duel and House of Gucci, will be in the show notes. You can find this show online at screenwritersurvivalguide.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Sam Brooks Presents. If we're delivering any insight or value to you, please, guys, drop us a rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us so you can get every new chapter of the show as it airs. And until next time, guys, don't just survive, thrive.